So I'm hoping that everyone can remember how wild 2021 got. Bitcoin flew off, altcoins took off as well, not to mention the billions that flooded in. However, I think this cycle is going to be a bit bigger. Now, I'm not saying that lightly. I am going to back it up with data. It's not going to be full-blown hopium that all your altcoins are going to pump. But in terms of monetary value, we've got to look at that fact and where certain things could go and how big it could get versus the prior cycle. So in today's video, I'm going to show you as many charts as possible and showcase potential targets that you may not be thinking about. If you like this sort of content, please do leave a like. It means a lot. It helps. But more importantly, comment. What is your biggest bag and what do you think will pump the most? So why is 2025 going to probably explode more than 2021? Let's talk about the numbers and the interest and the difference. Liquidity. Institutional liquidity is more important now than it ever has been. Now, people dislike that when I mention Bitcoin, people go, oh. But the reality is money is flowing into Bitcoin more than it ever has. Last cycle, Tesla bought Bitcoin. You probably remember. We were taken aback by that and we were like, ooh, okay. It flew, remember that catalyst? Institutional investment is strong, but on the screen is the M2 liquidity graph. Now, I don't think this is a be-all and end-all, I don't, but I do think it's going to create interest. And you know my channel, I'm more bearish on altcoins than I ever have been because I think people are setting themselves up to fail by playing the narrative of the last cycle when you probably will get wrecked. And what I mean by that, I think people are not looking at the obvious, they're looking at the low cap gem coins and the low cap coins. I think you need to look at the obvious, the fucking right there in front of obvious you need to look at. And the returns may not be as mental, but the conviction's probably much, much better in my opinion. That's all I'm going to say. But let's talk about the other one in the room. Obviously, I mentioned it before. Institutional investment is here. That is massive. The narratives could get bigger. The altcoin pumps in terms of the dilution into those from other bigger assets, so to speak, from gold, maybe other institutional wealth vehicles as well, could create a bit of a spike. But as I say, I think only certain narratives and certain things will move. These narratives could gain big traction. I think the Bitcoin ecosystem's one, AI, real world assets, deep in whatever, right? I think there's huge investment interest. The only negative to all of this at the minute is there's no throughput, there's no follow through into the institutional investment of Ethereum. Ethereum is struggling until we break out to the upside and we may get more and more interest there. But as I said before, don't pin your hopes on like a 20 million market cap coin, whatever. You are probably going to struggle to find results there, in my opinion. I think the market's very different now. Look at the obvious. Look at what's in front of you. Look what's already got billions there. You may find that they do very well. Now, in my viewpoint, Bitcoin is absolutely crucial. And I'm not going to say this lightly. I think Bitcoin will lead majority of this run, and people don't like to hear that. I do think we will get an alt season. I do think we will get something, but I think it will be very similar to what we've seen in 2024, where we had the start of last year, pretty good. The end of last year, pretty good. And I think that is where we're expecting big money. And when I talk about this video here, it's going to be bigger than 2021. It's because of that. The dominance has risen longer than ever before. The ability to dollar cost average and have cheaper Bitcoin, cheaper altcoins at a longer rate is more important. That would create bigger wealth because people are accumulating for longer. I'm talking here not return of investment. I'm talking about entire wealth creation here. You have got more money to play with. And when we think about this going into our third or fourth cycle for some people, it's probably going to be much bigger than 2021 because you have got longer to create wealth and build wealth. And I've said it before in previous videos, Bitcoin could go to some silly numbers. People are accumulating their Bitcoin. People are holding their Bitcoin, right? And that is all in the data and it's all there to see. You can see that all over the place. Where does that money go? Well, it's probably going to go into the obvious altcoins, or it's going to stay into Bitcoin and it's going to remain stronger and stronger and stronger, meaning that this cycle probably run for longer and, more importantly, create more money, and people are going to have more money because they are sticking with it. That is the biggest thing here. Whereas when we look at the previous cycle, it was very much the same as 2017. We had the bull market. This was the top. We pulled back into the consolidation. We just popped off very, very quickly. This time around, it's a lot bigger, a lot longer. And we are also have a much nicer structure base. It's more, in my opinion, more institutional base in a way, where it has that simple supply and demand. The problem we have is, as I said before, everyone's in that narrative, oh, all my altcoins are going to pump. Probably not. And that's where we need to talk about the likes of Ethereum. Ethereum BTC needs to bottom. Wherever this bottoms and whenever it does bottom, it's going to create interest. And I think we talk about the obvious in the room here. Are they with you? Yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Ethereum has to get out of this horrible downtrend. When that does happen, I think we are going to see some massive interest. And I talked about it before with Ethereum here on my X account. We need to get out of this whopping downtrend. You know, it's ugly, it's horrible. But once it does get out there, you might see more and more interest, and that altcoin rotation may well happen. But as I've said before, let me know if you agree or disagree. I don't think we're going to see the little $10 million markup coins fly up to $1 billion anymore. I think it's going to be the other way around. The big boys will probably do well. So while we're here, shall we just talk about some predictions? Now, if you want some exit plans and some guidance on that, jump in my Patreon. I talk about why you should have a plan and what you should be doing. So check it out. It's a tenner if you want to get in the Discord as well. Now, we'll start off with Ethereum because it's on the chat. Now, I remember, a year ago, people were talking about a $10,000, $12,000 Ethereum. Now, I think maybe that might not be the case. The reason being that BTC pair that I told you about. Now, for that to really do well, that really needs to pop off. And the biggest devil's advocate I can play is it depends on how well Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin goes to, say, $400,000, for example, random number off the top of my head, it's going to mean that that dilution of what your perceived value of altcoins is going to be much higher because all your altcoins have risen with the tide. But depends on what your BTC pair does. For this to really hit some skyrocketing levels and basically go to $10,000, for example, the BTC pair, which is this chart, has to somewhat recover. That could be very, very hard. So we need to look at the obvious in the room here. If this is the bottom, and if we are going to go and say put a 3x on it, yeah, you've got to look at that fact. But what about if Bitcoin only does like $180,000 level move? It's probably not going to hit those levels that people are probably expecting. So this has to have a real big run. That could be very interesting. It could probably catch a lot of people off guard. Just saying. This is why I'm trading altcoins, by the way, not investing, but there could be some really good runs, just saying. Now, when we talk about Ethereum, the way I look at this as pure structure, fucking chaos and carnage, and it looks horrible. With properly lost structure, it's ugly, it's a bit messy. Now, in my viewpoint, we have to look at this low here, which is 1,389 or whatever, 86, sorry. I would argue that we're going to struggle to get to some skyrocketing levels, and that's probably going to upset people. I know that. You're probably going, oh, fucking hell, let's just get off this video. But the structural integrity, we need to get above this level for one. We've got to get above the all-time high for another. And more importantly, where do the extension levels go? I honestly do think we are not going to get anywhere higher than this level. And that's going to probably upset people. But, as I said before, money's going to be made. Because people with a lot of wealth would have been seeing the opportunity to buy a lot of Ethereum down at these levels and probably made more money. But also you got to think, well, they'll just get out of Dodge and just probably convert into Bitcoin anyways. Because if you think about it in obvious logical terms, they could be making some real big BTC values on their altcoins here very, very quickly, but also bug out much earlier than you think. And that's probably going to hurt. Just going to say that now. Now, as I said before, I would be probably looking at certain levels, but it depends, as I said, it depends on what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin only goes up to, say, 120, 150, $200,000, you're not going to get towards those all-time highs if Ethereum BTC pair only does 60% move. Let's be honest here. So yeah, in my viewpoint, I think we're going to be very, very, very fortunate to get towards these levels. That's my overall viewpoint on it. Only because it's down so much. And also you got to talk about Solana, which we're going to come on to now. Because Solana looks a bit neater. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong. But the overall dominance of Solana versus Ethereum, they've really caught up with each other. 2.75% of the market dominance is now Solana. That's pretty decent. versus what it was a year or so ago. But more importantly, the fact of the weakness of the dominance of Ethereum is there. Again, we're talking about hated rallies. Yeah, there's possibility here. But what if Solana flips Ethereum? Ooh, fuck. That could be an option. Now, that situation alone is very interesting. But when we talk about the fact of the move here, we may well find that Solana retraces back up to some of these levels. And let's be honest here, they're not crazy moves. That wouldn't surprise me if it does like a 60, 70, 80% move. Quite obvious, really. That could lead to Solana doing a much bigger move on the upside here and probably creating a new all-time high in my viewpoint. The only reason we've got to look at that is obviously hype and the ability to create meme coins, and that meme coin sort of sector gets people interested. If we're looking from this as a potential correction point, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if we do go to $350, $400, $500 here, if Bitcoin has a strong move and if it retraces some of those levels, which I do think is possible with the narratives here. That's my overall opinion on Solana. I think it's a really solid asset, and I think people will miss the boat on it in weird terms because it could well do a very, very good tradable move. Doesn't mean invest all your money into it. It just means trade it. Trade the momentum, trade the hype, because if you see meme coin season coming, it's going to do the business. But now look at what's happened here with Sui. Sui's had an absolute giga candle here. Until you're probably going to find a lot of altcoins that are very, very obvious in really obvious high positions. You're going to think, fucking hell, what's happened here? Interest is returning. But as I said before, it doesn't mean all your altcoins are going to fly off. And it doesn't mean that your BTC dominance is going to drop to the floor, because there's only going to be, I think, a few and far between that are going to probably do very, very, very well. Some will probably just do okay. Some will do probably pretty terrible. And you're probably going to find that a lot of altcoins may well die, which is going to be a bit of an issue. Let's look at Bitcoin. Let's talk about Bitcoin, right? So when we talk about Bitcoin, you all know what my price targets are. I think there's situations what could mean us to go higher. Now, what does this mean for your altcoins, right? I'm just going to give you a really simple base case here. Every single altcoin, if they stand still, will go up 67%. If they go up to the top of this range, they will go up 125%, right? That is if your entire altcoin bag stays still on the BTC pair. You're probably thinking, what the fuck am I on about? But you get the idea in a minute. With that, your overall USD pairs will increase and the altcoin interest may well increase. The problem that we've had over the course of the last 4 years, and people do disagree with me on this, most altcoins have been shot to bits by Bitcoin. Let me just prove a point. Let's just go through each and individual one. This is Cardano, the melt. This is AVAX, the melt. This is BNB, the melt. This is Dogecoin. This is DOT. This is Ethereum. This is Link. This is Solana, which isn't as bad. Sui, pretty good, but it's a relatively new asset. Remember, it's not been around from the prior cycle. XRP. XRP is down a lot from the previous cycle. Now, that's just giving you an idea. But when we look at the fact of the BTC pair TOTAL3/BTC pair, this is the entire market. Now, most coins over the last 3 to 4 years have been battered by Bitcoin. And this is why I say about it, the obvious in the room there will probably correct. Now, I'm going to put this blunt. They will not make new all-time highs. They will not go, as in USD, they probably will. In the BTC pair, by the way, they will not go above here. That's 2020 levels, by the way, for Link. Ethereum, in my viewpoint, will not go beyond this level. I think the dilution's too much. I think the interest in Bitcoin's too high. So that's where we get a bit of a sticky point in terms of picking the obvious. But realistically, these are obvious moves. These are obvious bounces. These are obvious corrections. And even if they go up to certain levels, wherever they may be at certain points, you will make some money. And I think people will get caught out by that. I think people will literally think, oh, Ethereum's $3,000. Let's go to 10,000. They will get caught out and think it's going to go even higher. But I think the monetary value overall in this entire cycle is going to be much, much, much bigger because of these. The total market cap, I think, is going to be fucking mental. And if Bitcoin, say, $200,000, that's going to be a huge weight of it. When we talk about the total 2, we could be looking at a really nice number here. But realistically, where's it going to go? The structure is just about intact here. where can this go? What can we look at? Can we look at cycle low, cycle high, whatever, into some extension levels at $2.5 trillion? Potentially, yeah. But that might only be a 70, 80% correction on all your big assets going up in value, which is mad because look at the numbers. The numbers will tell you. That could only be literally 145% growth, a 1.48 trillion. So double? There's nothing crazy, is it, when you think about it? So monetary value is going to be an important factor here. And I think it will probably upset a lot of people when you think about it in terms of, well, there's that many assets out there that becomes a bit flaky. It becomes a bit of an issue. And that issue is dilution. And we all know that with all the new coins out there. The TOTAL3 / BTC, as I've alluded to it, is still at the lows. Still means it's not a bad time to be out of the market realistically and just wait and see what happens, because I still think there's a lot of confirmation that it happen. But realistically, people are going to look at this and go, well, what about if we fly? Well, we might do. But what about if Bitcoin leads most of it? You're going to be in a bit of trouble. Now, let's talk about the risks. Now, I think this is very, 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 very important because I am bullish, but I am grounded. What about if the Fed don't cut? What about if inflation spikes again? What if Donald Trump becomes a bit of a, let's not talk about that. What global conflict might increase? Market liquidity dries up. What about if there's not enough liquidity to go around? What if it all goes into gold and Bitcoin? What if it goes into certain property elements and that cycle kind of buggers off as well? There's so many situations here. But the reality is, I think I'm kind of going to be a little bit more right than wrong here in terms of liquidity for altcoins. And I think that's the worst thing about it. I said it before, those pullbacks we've had, they're longer than the previous cycle. And I think people are finally realizing that when they watch my content. The BTC dominance is on an uptrend of nearly 900 days. That's double the previous cycle. That's huge. But look at this on the screen here. That is the BTC cycle. It's lagging. It's not quite where it should be versus the other cycles. Let's be honest here. So it's a reminder to manage risk and to take profit on the strength and try and avoid the euphoria as well, because we've found that every single little euphoric period we've had an absolute nuke at the other side of it, and it's been pretty horrible to see. If you're taking screenshots and getting very, very, very excited, you're going to be, caught out. So when I talk about what I mentioned before, if every single one of those, like they're like the majory ones, let's be honest here, this here, like blow my head. If every single one of these has a nice correction and does like a 70, 80% move, I genuinely do believe that you should be taking some money off the table, because I think these opportunities come few and far between, because Bitcoin keeps leading. And the monetary value of Bitcoin is going to be massive if it's $200,000. Because what are people going to do? They're going to hold it. And that's why this cycle is going to be probably bigger than the previous ones, because Bitcoin ran on the last cycle, but it's sustaining at this point, and that's where the difference is. And that could really, really hurt people looking at the altcoins in different narratives, expecting to get rich because Bitcoin is doing well. And realistically, it's silently eating into the dominance of all your assets, because this may not go as low as you think. That could hurt. If it does go lower than I think, I'd happily be wrong, let's be honest. But I think more people trust Bitcoin now than your little altcoins. They trust it more than Ethereum as well currently. So yeah, that's a big problem. So there we go. I do apologize. I had a bit of a rant there, but I think for a lot of people, you need to kind of understand the experience side of it, of like why this cycle probably will be a little bit different. The charts do tell a little bit of a story, and it looks like we are building towards something pretty, I'm hopefully pretty bullish in 2025, because it does kind of align a little bit. But as I said before, I just do think that Bitcoin's going to be the leader of the pack here, and some of your obvious altcoins will pump, but may not pump as much as you'd like, or you realize in the gravity of the fact of the USD prices of Bitcoin, certainly. So yeah, doesn't mean blindly ape in. It doesn't mean, just jump in, whatever, but you need to prepare, not to FOMO. You need to have a plan and an exit plan that's strong. But let me know, what are your price targets? For me, $200,000 is, I can't compute anything higher than $200,000 for Bitcoin currently. I just can't. I'm hoping that changes. But the reality is, I just see this being a massive, massive shot for a lot of people who are trying to get rich very, very quickly. And I think that's a wrong way to do it. I feel like there's a lot of content creators as well trying to get out the market and be like, this is my end. I'm done. So we'll see where things go. PTSD might kick in again. So there we go. Leave a like if you agree with some of my stuff. If you don't like what I did, just don't leave a like, let's be honest. And subscribe for more. More breakdowns next week incoming.